She wasn't supposed to speak, not to him, not like that. But at 11:04 p.m., in a diner no one cared to fix, a young waitress looked Arnold Schwarzenegger in the eye and asked for a $50 tip. Not because she was rude, because she had nothing left to lose. What he did next made the entire diner stop breathing. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Los Angeles never really sleeps, but there are corners where breath forgets to rise. A diner slouched between a shuttered laundromat and what used to be a movie theater. The neon sign flickered out all but 3 letters. The awning sagged like an old bandage that had given up holding. Inside, the light was jaundiced and tired, like the last working bulb in a motel hallway. The scent was of burnt oil, scorched coffee, and something older, something human. Only one waitress remained, early 20s. No makeup, no name tag, her hair tied back with what might have once been a ribbon, now the color of dust and forgetting. She moved like someone who'd mastered the art of being invisible. Her motions careful, silent, the learned rhythm of someone no longer expecting to be seen. No one called her name. No one waited for her to finish. Then, the door creaked, not a chime, a hinge clearing its throat. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped inside. No cameras, no entourage, just him, carrying an old grey coat and the weight of a man who had seen more than this world ought to hold. He removed his glasses, folded them with the solemnity of folding away a memory. No rush, no flair, only presence. She walked toward him, left hand holding a notepad, right gripping a pencil worn to metal. Something to drink. Not a question, just a thread tossed across the silence. His answer came low, black coffee. She nodded, turned, but after 2 steps, she stopped. Still facing away, she said, "Would you be willing to tip me $50? No tremble, no shame. Just a sentence dropped like a stone in a still lake. Not a plea, not manipulation, a last boundary, a line scratched from beneath years of grease and silence. He didn't respond, he just looked. And for a moment, his face lost all its names, not the governor, not the legend, just a man, confronted with a question he once buried inside himself. She walked on, set down the check, folded once, clean. And in her own hand, she had written, "Tip, $50. Not a question, a mirror. What is a person's worth? When they are forced to name their price, just to be seen, he stared at it. The coffee arrived. Steam curled up once, then vanished. She did not return to the table. Behind the counter, her hand hovered above the register, not typing, not calculating, just still. No words were spoken, but between them, something had ignited. Not a flame, not yet, but the tiniest ember. Glowing. Beneath the ash, the receipt sat untouched, folded once, clean edge, ink still wet where the number had been written, $50 in her own hand. But it wasn't the money that made the air shift. It was the fact that she dared to ask. Emma stood behind the counter now, still as chalk. Her fingers hovered above the register but didn't move, not to count, not to calculate. Just to stay present, in the aftershock of being seen. Arnold hadn't touched his coffee. The cup steamed for a while, now it didn't. But he hadn't left either, not yet. Then a sound, from the kitchen. A door swung open hard. He emerged like a bad habit, sleeves rolled too neat, a clipboard under one arm, and that sharp look people wear when they think the whole place belongs to them. The manager, early 30s, crisp shirt, cold smirk. He walked straight toward her, didn't glance at the customer, didn't care. "I saw what you did," he said, loud enough for Arnold to hear. Emma didn't flinch. He picked up the receipt, squinted. "You asked for a $50 tip." She said nothing. He scoffed. "You want to shake down customers now? What's next?" Pickpocketing the old man's coat. Emma's eyes locked onto his for the first time, steady. "I asked because I had to," she said. He leaned closer. "Well, now you don't have to, because you're done." Arnold looked up, but didn't interrupt. Not yet. The manager turned to him. "Sorry, sir, we don't normally tolerate that kind of behavior here." Arnold's stare didn't shift. He didn't blink, but something behind his eyes narrowed. "She didn't take anything," he said, calm, even. "She offered a mirror." The manager laughed, sharp, performative. "I don't need philosophy, I need staff who follow rules." Then he did something no one expected. He reached across the counter, grabbed Emma's sketchpad, the one she kept under the till, and ripped the top page clean off. It tore with a sound that didn't belong to paper. It sounded like bone. "This isn't a therapy center," he said. "Draw on your own time." He crumpled the sketch and dropped it in the trash bin. Loudly, for show, and that's when Arnold stood, not fast, not forceful, just upright, and suddenly the air felt heavier. Like the room remembered it used to be a battlefield. He stepped forward, one hand on the counter. The manager froze. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the look in Arnold's eyes, not anger, but disappointment sharpened into precision. Arnold didn't shout. He simply said, "She didn't break your cafe, she just reminded everyone it was already broken." Then he turned to Emma, reached into his coat, pulled out the same receipt, placed it on the counter flat. Under it $50, cash, folded once crisp, and beneath that a silver mechanical pencil, old, scratched, real. He slid all three toward her, then turned. As he walked to the door, he paused by the trash bin, bent down, retrieved the crumpled sketch, unfolded it, smoothed it once against his chest, didn't look at it, then left. The bell above the door rang, but quieter this time, as if even the metal was embarrassed. Emma stood frozen. The manager tried to say something, but she raised a hand not to silence him, but to reclaim her own breath. Then slowly she took the pencil, the receipt, and the sketch, walked past him, and pinned all three behind the register. Not in hiding, in defiance. The receipt, the tip, the drawing, like evidence of a moment no one else had the courage to live through. Then she turned. "I'm taking my break," she said, not a request, a line in the sand. And for the first time, he didn't have a comeback. She walked out into the alley behind the diner. The sky wasn't bright, but it had started to clear. The next morning was quiet in the way old guilt often is. Not loud, not sudden. Just slow to rise, slow to admit it never really left. Arnold stood in his kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes. The floor beneath his feet was cold, like it had been waiting for this weight again. He hadn't turned on the lights. There was no need. Morning was creeping in through the blinds, cutting faint stripes across the table, across the unopened mail, the chipped mug, the corners of a world long kept in order but never truly touched. And there, almost hidden beneath a wrinkled napkin, was a book he didn't recognize. A sketchbook, small, frayed at the edges, a cartoon sticker peeling away on the back like a memory refusing to fully fade. He paused, then sat down. Not like someone resting, but like someone surrendering. He opened it. The first page, empty. The second, not. A hospital bed, oxygen line, a woman's face turned gently away as if trying to protect one last private moment. The pillow still holding the shape of her. He turned the page. Another drawing, and another, hands gripping plastic, a tray of uneaten food, a water cup half cracked, all of it seen not from within but from behind something, a curtain, a doorway. Like the artist had been afraid to fully enter grief, so they stood in its shadow instead. And then, one image stopped him, a girl hunched over a cafeteria table, drawing, not seen, not noticed, not asking to be. Her back curled inward like she was folding herself into the paper. Her shoe was untied, her lunch untouched. The way her fingers clutched the pencil, it wasn't just drawing, it was anchoring. A last attempt to stay here. In a world that had already made her invisible, Arnold's hand hovered above the page, not to touch, but to not touch, because he'd seen that posture before, long ago, in Vienna. In a house too big for emotion. His daughter used to draw like that, at the breakfast table, when she still believed he might notice, before she stopped showing him what she made, before she stopped waiting up. He swallowed, not loudly. Just once, like memory had risen too far in his chest, he turned the page, and there it was, an unfinished face, just one eye drawn, the other only a suggestion, the mouth barely hinted. Like even the graphite didn't dare assume what it felt like to be whole. And in the corner, almost lost in the dust, a quote, small, handwritten, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." He read it, then read it again. But this time not for meaning, this time to stay. He closed the sketchbook, but didn't move, not for a long time. Outside, the city stretched and blinked and blared, but in here the world held its breath, When he finally stood, it was slow. Like lifting weight that had waited decades to be acknowledged, he walked to the closet, knelt, opened the bottom drawer, a duffel bag, the kind you didn't use for travel, the kind you packed when something had to be made right. He placed the sketchbook inside, then tore a scrap from a legal pad, and in bold, almost blocky script he wrote, "Leave nothing to chance," folded it once, slipped it between the pages, zipped the bag shut. His phone sat nearby. He picked it up, scrolled to a name, then turned it face down again. There would be no call, not yet. When he walked to the car, the sky had barely changed. The streets were still half asleep, but his steps didn't rush. Every mile that passed didn't take him further from something. It folded what had been left behind. He didn't drive toward a destination. He drove toward a face he never finished. The light came in low, slicing across the linoleum tiles in long, fractured ribbons. Dust floated upward where it touched, suspended like memory. The tick of the clock over the coffee machine was louder than it should have been. Outside, a breeze nudged the door but didn't enter. Inside, the diner sat in that strange quiet between lunch and nothing, the kind of hour that didn't belong to anyone. Emma stood behind the counter. The salt shaker in her hand had been full 5 minutes ago. She didn't stop filling it. A piece of paper, curled at the corners, lay beneath the register, no longer white. The ink had faded to a soft gray. She didn't look at it. But she didn't move it either. The bell above the door gave one clear chime, not shrill, not urgent, just honest. Arnold walked in. He paused as the light caught him, throwing his shadow across 2 booths. He didn't adjust his coat, didn't scan the room. He walked to the same table as before, pulled out the same chair. He placed a sketchbook on the table. It was clean now, corners aligned, no tape, no dust. He slid it forward but didn't look at her. Then came the envelope, a flat black case. He opened it, turned it toward her. A check, folded once. He didn't push it, just placed it there. And beside it, a handwritten note. Emma stared, not at him, not at the money. At the crease in the paper, at how precisely it had been folded, at how quiet the room had gone. Her hands didn't move, but her throat did, barely. She walked over, sat down, across from him. She reached out slowly, not for the check, for the book. Her fingers brushed the edge, then paused. He placed a second slip beside it. It was the same note from earlier, yellow, corner-torn, "Leave nothing to chance." She read it once. Then he reached inside his jacket and set down a letter. Her name was on the front. She opened it, hands careful, movements slow. The paper made no sound. "I didn't come back to make things right. I came back because I remembered a face I forgot to finish. In your sketch, the girl is sitting, drawing. No one's looking at her, but she keeps drawing. That was me once, on a different continent, different language, same silence. You made me remember something I had sealed off like a room in an old house. So this is not charity, it's memory, it's acknowledgement, and it's yours, not because you asked, but because you didn't. We are all in the gutter. But maybe you're the one who never stopped looking up." Her breath caught halfway through, not audible, but something in the way she held the letter, as if the paper had grown heavier. Behind her, footsteps, the manager. He had his apron looped over one shoulder, phone in hand. His gaze snapped to the check. Then the bag, his tone dry. "What's all this?" He stepped forward, 2 steps too close. Emma didn't rise, but she placed her hand slowly, firmly over the check. The air thickened. He reached slightly, not fully, toward the check. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. "I'm going on break." She stood, didn't look at him, didn't look back. She walked past the door, the sunlight catching the edge of her apron. As it closed behind her, Arnold remained seated. His hand rested on the wood, the exact spot where the sketchbook had been. Outside, she paused, turned. Through the window, she saw him, head bowed slightly, not in defeat, in rest. The receipt under the register fluttered once in the breeze from the closing door, then fell still again. The check remained untouched. So did the truth it carried. The sky held its breath. Even the wind hadn't spoken yet. Just a thin mist on the windowpanes and the hush of a town not quite ready to open its eyes. Lena arrived first. No knock, no greeting. Just the shuffle of soles over old tile and the sound of breath behind a surgical mask, not for health, but for memory. Her fingers moved over the counter, like tracing Braille from another life. She wiped away yesterday's coffee ring, not for the customers, for herself. At 6:42 a.m., the chalkboard outside had changed, slightly smudged but resolute. Arnold came next. No coat. Just a navy sweater and that silence he always carried, like stone carried in a river. He didn't sit. He stood by the counter, waiting. Lena nodded, poured the coffee without asking, without price. It was an old contract. Unspoken but signed in time. At 7:05, Emma walked in, not hurried, not hesitant. She moved as though stepping into a room she already knew, a life she had once been asked to leave. Her apron was folded over one arm. Her shoes were wet, her eyes dry. She took her place behind the counter. No one welcomed her, but no one asked her to leave. The first customer was an older man with dust on his sleeves. He gave her a glance, then the smallest nod. Left a 10 for a $5 coffee. She didn't thank him, just matched his silence. By 9:12 a.m. the door opened again. The manager, he wore a too crisp coat. No clipboard, just a leather-bound ledger he held too tightly. His entrance was deliberate. He approached the counter like a man testing water that no longer belonged to him. "Emma," he said, "you're not on the schedule." She didn't look up, just finished wiping a spot on the counter. Then finally, "I'm not on the clock. Pause, I'm just here." He stepped closer, the room cooled. "This place still answers to me," he said, voice level but dipped in quiet threat. Emma's hands stilled. She looked up. "Then you're knocking on the wrong door." The cafe held its breath. He reached a hand toward the tip jar, not to take, but to test. Arnold stood. He didn't move forward, didn't speak, but the way he stood made the room smaller for the man. Lena moved beside Emma. Her hand brushed Emma's lightly, no words, just a transfer of weight, of belief. The manager faltered, his voice quieter now. "You think this place is yours." Emma's voice was steady. "It stopped answering to you the day you stopped listening." He stared at her, then at Lena, then at Arnold, and saw no fear. He turned, no slam of the door, just a retreat so quiet it might have been mistaken for shame. The cafe exhaled. At 11:03, a customer left 3 bills, one folded like a paper crane. Emma placed it gently into the jar, then turned the chalkboard. No one clapped, no smiles, just eyes meeting eyes. Arnold stood. Walked to the booth he had once claimed. Didn't sit. He rested one hand on the table. His gaze touched a small scratch on the wood, a crescent worn by decades of elbows, coffee cups, sketchbooks. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, landing directly on the chair across from it. He nodded and left. Outside, the sky stayed gray, but inside, beneath the register, the same receipt had curled 1 inch deeper. As if it too had waited and finally exhaled. The cafe had no grand reopening, no ribbon, no press, just a small chalkboard outside where someone had written "back on," black coffee, still hearts. Inside, the air moved like breath held too long, the scent of burned espresso, worn leather, and something else, like warmth that never fully left. Grace arrived before sunrise. Before the light stretched across the linoleum floors, before the hum of refrigeration took over from silence. Even the wind hadn't spoken yet. She wore no makeup, no perfume. Just the ring, the same apron, and a small pin on her collar, a silver coffee cup with a star in the foam. Tiffany had given it to her. "Some people get stars on Hollywood Boulevard," the girl had said. "You get yours here." Lena returned too, not because anyone called, because some places don't reopen, they reawaken, on belief, and caffeine, in that order. At 6:07 a.m., the first customer arrived, a man in a maintenance vest. He didn't speak, she didn't need him to, she handed him his usual. He left a folded note beneath his change. She opened it only after the bell had stopped ringing. It wasn't signed, just 3 words, "You held ground." She placed the note inside the jar by the register. She didn't cry, but she stood straighter. At 6:29, Tiffany appeared, eyes like she'd walked through fire, but her feet still knew the way. She paused at the threshold, half expecting the walls to reject her. Grace nodded. A full, still nod, not an invitation, but an acknowledgement. Tiffany stepped forward. No hug, no apology. Just a cup being poured before a single word left her lips. Grace slid the cup forward. When Tiffany reached into her bag, Grace stopped her, not with a hand, but by refilling the cup, to the rim this time. Tiffany froze. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out an old fountain pen. Scratched, silver, the cap dented, she placed it beside the cup. Grace said nothing, but her fingers paused on the saucer a little longer than necessary. Later, the regulars filtered in, not in packs, but like birds returning to a forgotten tree. Someone brought a stack of fresh napkins without a word. Another slid a folded matchbook under the leg of a chair, no more squeaks. Lena changed the radio to a Chopin prelude. No one moved to change it. At 10:17 a.m., Arnold returned. He stood by the door, not for effect, but as if measuring the soul of the room and finding it steady. He walked forward, boots silent on the old floor. When he reached the counter, Grace was already watching. He placed a box on the surface, brown paper, tied in thin string, nothing else. For her, he said. Grace didn't ask who. She waited until he left, then unwrapped it. Inside, a sketch, the booth, Emma's booth, drawn in graphite, soft and real, but Emma wasn't just sitting, she was sketching. In the drawing, her hand was mid-stroke, drawing something beyond the frame. Her brow calm, her eyes not watching, but remembering. Light from the window fell across her hair like a hush. At the bottom right corner, we draw what we miss, and sometimes we don't know it's us. Grace didn't move. Then slowly she walked to the wall beside the register, found an empty space, hung it without a word. Lena noticed first. She didn't say anything either. Then a man near the window stood. He walked to the frame, rested 2 fingers against the glass, just long enough for the gesture to matter. Another followed, then another. No one spoke, but the cafe's silence changed color. At 11:50, a woman approached the counter. "Do you have Wi-Fi?" she asked. Grace smiled. "No signal," she said, "just presence." The woman nodded and stayed. At 12:03, Arnold passed by the window again but didn't come in. He paused outside, eyes on the booth. Then turned, no wave, just stillness. Inside, the receipt beneath the register curled 1 inch deeper, as if it too had waited and finally exhaled. The bell above the door rang. No one looked up. They didn't need to. Some names echo without sound. Rain came softly that morning, brushing the windows with a hush too gentle to disturb. Inside the cafe, the light was dim but golden, a veil of warmth diffused through old glass and steam rising from fresh coffee. The world outside was gray, but in here it glowed like memory. Grace moved behind the counter with quiet precision, her hands familiar with every drawer, every creak in the floor. A tune played low from the radio, half forgotten and instrumental. Lena wiped down the sugar containers. No words, just the soft syncopation of cloth, ceramic, breath. At 7:42, a boy stepped in. 11, maybe 12. Hoodie too big, shoes wet. He hesitated by the door, as if the cafe might ask for something he couldn't pay. Grace met his eyes, then pointed gently to a booth near the window. He walked there, sat, waited. She brought him a cup of hot cocoa. No questions. Later, a woman with a stroller came, then a man who used to sit alone at the bar, now with a book in hand. A group of teachers, 2 bus drivers. A stranger who lingered too long by the sketch. No one spoke of what the place had become, but everyone moved a little slower, like walking through a sacred room where silence isn't demanded, but deserved. At 9:06, Arnold returned. He didn't sit at his old booth. He stood, behind the register, quietly tying an apron. Lena handed him, not a hero's welcome, not even a nod. Just acceptance, like a tree returning to a forest it was born in. Someone called out an order. Grace looked up. Arnold was already pouring. At 10:11, a woman in a pressed blouse entered. Clipboard, tight bun, government badge. She scanned the room with brisk efficiency, eyes pausing only a second on the sketch. "We received a permit application," she said, "for community zoning adjustment. This space isn't listed as a registered co-op." Lena straightened. Grace stepped forward. "We're not a co-op." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Then who's the owner?" For a moment no one answered. Then Arnold spoke, not loud, but every voice fell under his. "No owners," he said, "just stewards." The woman looked at him, unimpressed. "And who signs for the taxes?" Grace reached below the counter, produced a small envelope, slid it across. "The one who never left," she said, "and the ones who came back." The woman opened the envelope. Inside, signatures, dozens, some neat, some trembling, some only initials. The badge flickered in her hand. She didn't smile, but she nodded. "Then it's yours, whatever this is." And left. No cheer followed. Just stillness, as if the room had bowed its head in gratitude. At noon, the sketch was moved, from the side wall to a place above the register, framed in new wood, lit by a bulb someone replaced without asking. Below it, someone had carved a line into the wood. A place is not defined by who builds it, but who refuses to leave. At 1:03, the boy from earlier returned, this time with his sister. Arnold crouched beside them, sliding 2 cups of cocoa forward. No words. At 1:46, the bell rang, and Emma walked in, not a ghost, not a memory, just a girl with a bag on her shoulder and a shadow behind her that didn't stretch as far as it used to. The room didn't erupt. No gasps, no applause, but Grace stepped out from behind the counter, and for a second, only one, their eyes met and held. Emma moved to the sketch, looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "I never looked like that." Arnold stood behind her. "No, but you might be if someone had seen you in time." She turned. In her hand was a folded note. She placed it on the counter beside the register, then walked to the booth, her booth. Arnold opened the note later. It read, "Thank you for staying, even when I didn't." He placed it behind the sketch, taped it gently. By closing time, no one had asked Emma to leave, and she didn't. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sidewalk still shimmered. Inside, a chair rocked once, and then was still. The bell rang, but no one turned. Some arrivals don't need an audience, and some returns are the quietest form of homecoming.